Okay, so let's start today. The last class we looked at manipulating the DOM, manipulating DOM elements. These are the things we looked at: document.getElement by ID, element.inner HTML, element.inner text, element.text content, and we looked at element.value. And we basically created a div and we put all of this into the div. This was the code we had from the last class in regards to DOM manipulation. Today we are going to continue on that part. However, what we're going to look at today is a little bit more about looping and manipulating the DOM with loops. So let's take, for example, you are making a call to an API to get a list of, for example, objects, right? And each object has specific key value pairs and properties as usual. And now we want to collate, we want to basically retrieve this list from an API, and then we basically want to populate the DOM based on this list. So what we are going to do is basically put a combination of the for each loop that we have actually learned previously together with the DOM elements that we have actually learned also, and then based on that we would actually populate it to the DOM. So I don't know if someone could mute the mic. I think there is some door sound in the background at the moment.
Yeah, sorry, it was me, but it's
okay. Okay, all good. All right. So basically, what we will have today would be, let's start here. Let's come here and let's create the list of objects constant. Let's call this response from API. We're just going to basically mock this, and let's give this a list, and let's put an object. Let's say ID equals 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Let's have that, and let's say name Steven. Say city, goes Helsinki. I'm just gonna copy this and duplicate that. And just change this a bit randomly. Let's change this to Joshua. Let's change this to Victor. Let's change this to Janne. And let's change this to, I want a bit more Finnish name.
You can put that line name.
Okay.
Or Mika.
Mika, yes. Let's put Mika. So let's say Joshua stays in Vanta, stays in Espoo, stays in Toku, stays in Uvascular. Okay, so now we have this response from API, and what we want to do is to print out a list of elements that basically have, for each element there is an ID. We print out the name and the city. So first things first, let's have a very basic template that we want to use for this particular case. So let's say constant user info HTML. Put this equal to, and let's so now let's start by creating a div. Start by creating this div, and let's turn this here. And I will just leave this at that. Now, we would not necessarily need this, but basically what we are going to have is we will insert this div into the bottom of the page. So let's give this a unique ID. Let's call this div API. Let's append it with JS API response. Right, now we have this div. We are going to insert this div to the bottom of our page. We will insert this div into the bottom of the page so that when the page is loaded, that div actually is in the page. So at the end, when our JS loads, the div would always be there. So who has an idea of how we would actually go about inserting this div into the page?
I think we're going to get element by ID, and then we equal it to the constant user info HTML.
Okay, but if we get element by ID, what element are we getting? Because this div ID with JS API response is not actually on the page at the moment. So what div are we going to be getting?
Okay, hold on. I think in the HTML we have to create something that maybe a paragraph or a div that will connect with this ID that we created.
Okay. Today we're going to learn something new. I just wanted to have a general idea what you think. What we are going to learn today is, so now we have learned about document.getElement by ID. We've learned that when we get the elements, we can do element.innerHTML. We can do element.innerText. We can do elements.text content. We can do element.value. Today we're going to learn about document.body.appendChild. Now, if we come here, let's come to the console and write document.body. What we get is the body. of the entire document.
Okay.
Right. Now, if you go here, remember in our semantic HTML, we have the head and the body, right? Good. Before we
Yes.
have our script. So when I do document.body, basically I'm getting this entire everything within the body tag. And as you can see here, at this point, it includes everything we have actually put down there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, let's come below and let's say document.body.append child user info HTML. Now, question: do you think this would work?
No.
Why do you think this would not work?
Because one, it's not connected to the HTML.
Okay. Let's see. That's not exactly the reason, but let's take a look. Let's take a look. So if I refresh this, we don't get anything. Now, if we do document.body, if we do document.getElements by ID, JS API response, we get null. Good. Now, the reason is this. First, I need to do, let's call this constant div, and I need to call what? I'm introducing a few new concepts here. Document.create element. Now let's log out our div. Save that and I'll refresh the page. Now you see, let me just take this back. Now if you see here, we have a div element created. So take note, we have introduced create element. Now if I come here and I say document.append child div, and I save this and I refresh this page, you see we have div. Now if I do document.body here and we open up body, you see that we have the div.
Yeah.
Good. Now what I have done is basically create a div and appended the div to the end of the body. So there are two things here that we have introduced. We have introduced document.createElement and document.body.append child. As the name implies, create element basically creates a HTML element, which is a tag. So here it creates the div tag. This can be a p tag, for example, which you can put a text inside. So for example, say we want to create, say, constant, let's call this paragraph, and then let's do document dot create element, and let's call this p, and let's come here and say console.log paragraph. Let's save this and let's refresh. Now you see we have a p tag here. Now I will just quickly introduce something else. Let's say constant, just to show you what append child means. Append child basically means you're adding something to that HTML element. So let's say constant text for paragraph equals to document dot create text node. Take note, that's another one I'm introducing. This is a paragraph. This is a paragraph, right? And now I can come below and say paragraph dot append child, which is what we already used on the body, append child text for paragraph. Now if we take this down here, and we log it after that point, let's refresh. We see that inside the P we now have, this is a paragraph, right?
Yeah.
So basically, that's how you use the append child. You use it to put an element inside different node. Now what we are going to be working on today, this was just, I wanted to use this to introduce a few concepts, but now that we get the general picture, this is not basically what we're working on, but this just, I wanted to show you how we're going to be doing it. Now, remember we talked about the for each in our previous lessons. So what we are going to be doing today.
Hello, Steven.
Yes, yes.
Sorry, two things. I'm a bit lost, but I think I've not read all the other notes. Probably maybe I should do that before.
Okay, no, but go ahead. Ask a question if you're confused.
I have to leave now to attend to family. So.
Okay.
Is there class tomorrow?
Yes, there will be one. It will be a short one. I think it will be 40 minutes, but yeah, there will be one class tomorrow.
All right. Please, you have to excuse me for today.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we're basically going to use the knowledge we have from our for each loop, and we will use that to create basically we will use that to actually create a list of elements that we can later add. Now, take this. So let's say we have our const HTML list, and I will put this to an empty list. Then I'm going to take every single element we have there. So we say response from API dot for each and we will say element, which is EL, and what we will have here is that for each element we want to create, I would say, const element HTML. Let's change this to item. And let's change this to item also, because we are iterating over a list of items from the API. Item HTML equals, I will put this. Let's come down here and let's create a div. Let's close the div. And let's come down and let's put here id equals item.id, where id here is referring to the id of each item. And then we come down and we say p name, and we put the name here, item.name, and we close the p here, and we come down again. I will just put a little break here just to show, and then I will put another p and we say city, and let's call this item.city, and we put another p here. Now after we generate this, I want to push it into the HTML list, so I would say HTML.
Before you go on, can I ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead.
What we are trying to do now is like create a div and a paragraph that puts the item from the
so API basically, yes.
So HTML.
Yes.
But if I'm wrong, earlier on when we did that, we did like document or create element. But in this case, we are not doing any of that. So how will the HTML element be created?
Awesome. So basically, what we are going to do this time, right, is a little bit different. What we are going to be doing this time, in this case, is that we would have a specific div added. So we have created this div, right? And we have appended this div to the body.
Yes.
Right? Good. What we are going to do is that we would modify this div to have a specific ID. And then we would get that element that matches that ID, and we will set the inner HTML to our HTML list here.
Okay.
Yeah. So work with me. We will go through it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm a little bit jumpy.
Yeah. But we'll get there, don't worry. So we say HTML list dot push, and then we will push the item HTML. Now down here, I will do a quick console.log, and let us take a look at our HTML list when it's done. I'm going to comment most of this out for now, so that we don't have that running, and I'll save this and let us run. And we have the div. So we have created, this is our HTML list. This is the first element. The name is Steven, city is Helsinki, the name is Joshua, city is Vanta, the name is Victor, city is Espoo, the name is Janne, city is Turku, here the name is Mika, and city is Jyväskylä. So we have created this element. So we have created this HTML divs, and we in string form, and we have put them into a list.
Yes.
So we have this list down here and we have populated them. All we have done here is loop through the response from our API and create divs based on that. Now let's make this a little bit nicer. Since this is P and we want to show this name, maybe we put a bold here just to make the name bold. And let's make that P. Let's do the same thing here. I will just copy this, paste it right here, copy this, and this goes down right there.
You didn't hand the tag for the board.
Yes, the closing tag.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. Okay, now we have that. So if we refresh this, we actually have them as bold. Now, like we said, we have created a div up above. We didn't give it an ID.
Yes.
So what we are going to look at is how to create an attribute. So we looked at create element. Now we're going to look at what we call create attribute. So we created an element here. We basically went ahead to append the element, which is the div element, to the body, and we put it append child. So now let's try to create. We have created the element, so let's create properties, in this case attributes that the element should have. So let's come here and say constant attribute ID will be equals to document dot create attribute ID. Now attribute ID dot value, so basically we want to give the ID a value, dot value equals, let's call this div JS API response, like we had here, because this is what we are trying to create now. Let's call this JS API response, and now we would say div. So take note, we have introduced create attribute. We've introduced that there. We've set the attribute value, so what the ID should be, to JS API response. Now what I'm going to do is div.set attribute, set attribute node, and I will pass at this point attribute ID. Now here we've introduced another, we've introduced another set attribute node. Okay, now when we when we save that and then we refresh this page, you see that we have a div with an ID JS API response, which is what we wanted to create here, right? Good. So now we have successfully created a div. Basically, we have created a div element with pure vanilla JavaScript, not HTML. We have added an attribute to the div called ID. This. We have set the attribute ID value to JS API response this by doing that here, and then we have basically set the attribute node, basically adding all of this into the div, and now we have the div here.
But which one is easier? Using HTML to create it, or doing it like it in vanilla JavaScript?
No, you can. It's easier to create with HTML, but that is when you know about the data you're getting, right? Also,
Okay.
yeah. Also, in this case, of course, we can easily just copy this, paste it inside the HTML, right, and then get it. But if I do that, then you basically would not actually understand that it's actually possible to create this from JavaScript itself. A lot of the JavaScript frameworks that you use are basically these are the background logic behind it. They have what is called the virtual DOM, where they basically use vanilla JavaScript to create most of these elements and do the getters and setters. Yeah. So I think it's important to actually teach these parts so that as we go on, you have a better understanding about it, and it gives you a proper knowledge regarding the document object model in that sense.
Cool.
Yeah. So let's say now we have that, right? I'm going to introduce something a little bit new, but not so complex also. In JavaScript, when dealing with arrays, we have the possibility to make an array turn into a list. Make an array turn into a string. This is one of the possibilities that JavaScript actually offers. This is one of the possibilities that one of the things that are possible with JavaScript. You can convert an array into a string. So we have there's an inbuilt method called toString, right? And the toString, what it does is that it basically takes everything you have inside your list and convert it to a string. Now here, for example, we have this list, right? We have this list which is a comma separated list, yeah? So what we are going to do is that we will convert this list to a string. When we convert it to a string, of course, we would still have these commas here. And then we would basically do a split and a join. We would split all the commas and then we'll join. Sorry, just we will get this. Another alternative would basically be to, instead of just using toString, we can just use the join and join all of them together. So what I will do here is just to show how this will work. We can actually do html.toString so that this doesn't show as a list. Now when we refresh this, we have all of this as strings, right? As you can see.
Yeah.
Problem is that we have this comma here on everyone. If we insert this into the DOM, we will have all the divs show properly, but we will always have this comma.
The comma.
Yeah. So what we will do in this case is to use the array method called join. And we will be passing an empty string as the argument to it. Now if we refresh, we basically see that we don't have the commas anymore. Yeah, so the commas are gone. You can spend a little bit of time and look into the join method for arrays, or the toString method. Yeah, but this
I actually thought sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I actually thought the toString is all the only use is for like to convert a number to string. I didn't know you can use it on array also. And also the join, is it only for like taking away commas, or does it have any other things
No,
it
you can
does?
use it. You can use it for any other thing. So let's say, for example, this empty one here removes commas, right? If I take this out, for example, it will give us the same thing that toString would actually give us.
Okay.
Because it defaults to the comma separator. So if we refresh this, you see we have the default comma separator. Now, if for example I wanted to, instead of have, sorry, I will take this out, bring this back. So if for example I wanted to have, instead of comma, I wanted to have a dash, right? If we save this and we refresh this, you see that we now have a dash in place of where the comma was.
Yeah.
So basically, when we take this dash out, what we are doing is that we are replacing the comma with an empty space.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you refresh, now it's no longer there because we have replaced it with this, right? So, but yeah, we can, you can always look a bit more into how this actually works. Yeah, you can always look a bit more into that. Okay, now since we have appended the div here, there is a div down here. If we do document dot body, we see when we open the body, we'll scroll down, we see that there's a div here called JS API response. Now, instead of appending it here, I could have just set all of this part, I could have set it inside before appending it, but let us basically consolidate the things we learned from the previous class to actually use here also. So what we will do here is that we will basically take what we learned from the previous class. We will say constant API response div equals to document dot get element by ID, and here we will pass JS API response. Right. And now we will do a quick console.log API response div, and let's refresh this, and we see we get the div JS. Yeah. Now, since we have this div, we will go ahead and say API response div dot, we use the inner HTML we learned the last time, inner HTML equals to HTML list dot join, and then we put that. Now let's take this out, let's save this, and let's refresh the page, and now we see we have different divs which actually match. Now you see, if we come to the bottom, you see that we have city Helsinki name Joshua, city Vanta name Victor, city Espoo name Yane, city Torku name Mika, right? City Jyväskylä. My bad. The breakpoint was on the wrong part.
Yeah.
The breakpoint should have been below. But yeah, now if we refresh, we should get it a bit better formatted. Right, so let's take this out here. And let's take this out also. So yeah, this is basically how you would dynamic. So if, for example, you got data from an API, in the form of list an array of objects, and you needed to populate the DOM based on that. This is pretty much how you would go about it. Yeah. But yeah, this is basically it for today. Tomorrow, what we will work on is making a request to an actual API, getting the results, and then populating the div based on the result. But for today, yeah, for today we are just mocking what an API response is and populating the div based on that response. From tomorrow, we would actually make a call to an actual API, get it back, and then populate the div.
So is it possible that we can use JavaScript instead to actually communicate with an API?
Exactly. It is JavaScript that we will use to make the request to an API. We will make the request to an API that's open, get the response from this API, and then we will populate the div based on the response. We would use JavaScript. We would use the native fetch API that is actually available on evergreen browsers, most evergreen browsers. Yes. So the task, the homework for today against tomorrow is basically, well, now it's a little bit tricky because I've actually done it all here. So let's see. Let's find something that I haven't shown yet. Okay, good. I have a very good idea. So the homework that we're going to have is basically for you to extend this functionality that we have here. And by extending this functionality, what I need you to do is that after this, basically extend this thing that we have done such that there is a button after city, there's a button below it, and when I click that button, it should trigger a function that will tell me basically the function. It should basically log to the console. It should trigger a function that will log to the console the name of this person is. If, for example, I click the button for Yanne, the button under name city, name Yanne city Torku. If I click that button that's under this, it should log to the console. The name of this person is Yanne, and he lives in Torku. So the homework for today is to extend what we have done such that there's a button below, and that button actually triggers a function. So remember, it's like when we studied buttons, we studied on click. So use the onClick handler to pass a function that will basically take the name and city and then log this out to the console. I'm not going to write this as a description, except you really want me to. But basically, that's going to be the homework for today. And then tomorrow, if you have any difficulties with the homework, it's totally fine. We can go through it later on also and see where the problems might come. But yeah, for today, this will basically be it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, because I guess I'm the only one online right now.
So yeah. Maybe
if you have the time, you could write the description so that others could actually see it even if they not watch the video.
Yes, actually, yeah, you're right. I think I should do that. Yeah.
And one other question I have is, like, because I was thinking about something exactly that we are doing now, like fetching the data from an API. Because a friend of mine, he made like a mock-up of all these online movie website that where you can watch all these free movies. So it did something like that. So I was thinking maybe I could do it. So if I'm fetching the data from API, I could actually write a code like we just did to display the content on the web page.
Yes, yes, we could actually do that. We could absolutely do that for sure. That would even be a very good project to start with.
Okay. So let me see. After tomorrow, then maybe I'll be a little bit.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. I think it will be fine. I think it's not so complicated. Usually, the problem is about how it's taught. So, I think if we go through it tomorrow, you should be well equipped to try it on your own already.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Alrighty, I will stop the recording now.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I'm sure every other guys also really appreciate the time. And
No problems at all. Sorry that this past period it's been quite hectic for me, but we will get a bit into it more.
I understand. I mean, it's really different. Like the way you teach and every other class or tutorial I've watched. It's. I mean, there's a lot of difference.
Well, I'm glad I can help. For me, I think that's also the important part, that when you teach, it's important that the person on the other end also gets it. When the person, at least then you know that you're doing something right. So for me, that's the joy that you guys can understand.